Let's talk about stats in women's football. So chances are, if you watch any of my breakdown and analysis videos, regardless if it's gameplay, if it's previews of a game, if it's performances of a certain player, chances are I'm talking a little bit about stats and numbers. Despite contrary beliefs, I'm neither a mathematician or a statistician to be coding for these numbers. In fact, I actually use readily available information to be able to extract all these numbers and bring them to you in my content. The platform that I use and one that we will be going through today is actually Stathead. So I've partnered up with Sports Reference, who are the folks behind Football Reference and the ones that have Stathead, which is a paid research tool available for anybody to use. Stathead is currently completely free to use up until February 1st of next year. Once that rolls around, it will be a $9 subscription fee each month, where student discounts are actually also applicable. So at this time, you can make an account and you will not even need to put in any credit card information. Today, I'm going to be going through Stathead, how I use it, how I use its tools, how I use its filters to use some of the stats during my videos, as well as go through some of the pros and cons, in my humble opinion, about Stathead. So once you hop on to stathead.com/football reference, this is how it's going to be looking like if you are on somewhat of a purple looking like screen with a soccer or a football logo. Then you've logged on to the right place. They've got plenty of tools to explore stats of numbers of players as well as teams. So today we're going to be starting off with player tool finders, which are honestly some of my favorite to play around with. So the second you hop on, there are obviously some examples that you can already log on to, but this is how your screen is going to be looking like. On the left, you've got the search criteria, and this is the engine that you're going to be putting in all your filters. And on the right hand, you've got the results. Now this is nice and easy and fantastic because it's not taking you from one tab to another. Everything is happening exactly on the same tab, where you can go back and from the criteria, changing and tweaking things whenever you like. I'm currently prepping to write a small piece about the Champions League after match day 4, and something that I'm interested in, I want to see which players have had a certain amount of contribution for goals and assists, which is a pretty easy thing to jump on and see. Obviously, for today, we're going to be looking at women's competition. Obviously, there's men's football clubs as well, but for today, we're going to be looking at the women's game. There's plenty of domestic leagues, plenty of domestic cups, which we will also be exploring. But like I mentioned, I'm more interested in a little bit in the Champions League, specifically this season. So very quickly, I'm able to navigate some of the information that I want, and this is where I find my statistical filter. Goals and assists is right there, and really neatly you can actually specify what number you're looking for. So given we're only 4 match day games in, I want to see if there is a single player that's had 5 or more goals and assist contributions. You can again almost always play with this. If you want it to be specifically to 5, you can hop on that, but I want to see if there's anybody who's had 5 or more. I will hit results here. It will fetch for my results, and there I have it, 3 players, and only 3 players that have been able to hit that criteria. So on the same set of results for the goals and assists, I'm getting the number of matches they played, the minutes, their starts, their substitutions, again, goals and assists breakdown very neatly here. And then if you want to get a little bit more specific, we can talk a little bit more about non-penalty goals. Very, very neat. If I want to get a little bit more specific, I can just go back to my criteria, which thankfully has not been erased, so it's right there. And I want to see who has been able to do that from the 2021 to 2022 season, just to compare. Now, understandably, the season is still going on, but is Sam Kerr possibly in there? Well, we can see. I'm waiting. And all right, so clearly there's a lot of players. There's 43 players who were able to hit that criteria. Now, clearly 5 goals obviously is one that is pretty achievable usually in seasons. So obviously it's been categorized in goals and assists because that was the filter, but again, very neatly you can kind of assort it to what you wanted to. So if you're looking at the past seasons or the oldest season that we have put in, you can also get who had the most amount of contributions then. But I want to switch some things around. I want to go into the WSL and look at who has been doing really, really well in front of goals, or at least shots being taken. Now, this is exactly a stat that I looked up to when I was breaking down the North London Derby episode right before this one. So if you haven't watched it, I recommend you do. And I was looking at the Manchester City, Arsenal, and Tottenham numbers. But then again, I still want to look at players player specifically and not teams just yet. So I can just go into the shooting range here and look at shots on target. I'm not really interested in a specific number, but I will actually specify it to expected goals of more than 2. So again, I'm not putting it down specifically to shots on target. I'm kind of leaving that open, but I want to see somebody who scored 2 or more goals and sits pretty high on the shots on target. Get results. It's fetching. And there seems to be a lot of players, but I do feel like I did have it for any. Right, so let's specify it to this season. And it doesn't take too long. There it is. Feels like everybody, or not everybody, about 26 players are doing very, very good at that. And unsurprisingly, obviously, Khadisha Shaw leading that golden boot. Interestingly, it is the Manchester City player that I'm looking at, as well as Martha Thomas. Now, Shaw, as we know, scored a hat-trick against Spurs. And Spurs, when they got their first North London derby win, it was through Martha Thomas. Now, that's really neat, but I want to specify some of those numbers a little bit more. I want to look at somebody who's taken more than 15 shots on target and has an expected goals of 2. I don't know what this criteria is going to look like. I feel like that is... Still, we're sitting with Khadisha Shaw, Martha Thomas, Lauren James, and Chloe Kelly. Those are actually numbers that I did use in my North London Derby video, and it came straight out of this looking at players who sit very, very high on their goals expected. Now, if you look at this, then you're able to tell that Khadisha Shaw sits with the highest amount of goals expected. A 5.6 is actually ridiculously high. But even with this, I can scroll a little bit down and I can see all of her shots stats. So even stats that I maybe wasn't looking for exactly. Let's do another one here in the... I don't know what we're feeling. What are we feeling? Let's do the Frauen Bundesliga. And let's actually narrow it down to midfielders and forwards. And I want to look at passes, because passes are super, super fun. And if you watch the Frauen Bundesliga, you do know a ton of really neat passes happen there. I'm looking at progressive passes, as well as, let's go down to the passes again, pass completion percentage. I want to see somebody who's really, really good at their pass completion percentage. So I want to say 70% at least. Progressive passes, you know what? We'll just keep that open. And actually, to make it just that much more fun, we're going to put in a third filter, another third passing filter. And let's say crosses into the penalty area. Somebody who's put in more than 7 crosses into the penalty area. So we're getting into the really nitty gritty stuff here. 3 filters. I really actually don't know if somebody's been able to hit those numbers. Yeah, I feel like maybe we were a little bit too specific, but that's okay. We'll open up positions and drop the crosses into the penalty at 4. Okay, let's see. And we do have some players who have hit those numbers. That's also very interesting because the last 3 players I believe are defenders. Yeah, so it's defenders sitting high on this category that I honestly thought a midfielder will slip into. I think it could be because of the passes, crosses completed into the box. So I feel like if we take that away, again, a simple quick click, I'll still take the defenders and goalkeepers off, keep midfielders and forwards on, and there it is. Yes, it looks like that was kind of restricting it, but that is really cool. I don't think I would have associated the number of crosses into the box with that high of a pass completion with a defender, but that's the beauty with playing around stats that are so readily available to us like this. Now, switching gears a little bit into teams, you literally hop onto the team's finder. Doesn't take too long to switch, and again, like I mentioned, you're looking for the women's football teams. Again, you can also play around this for the men's. So again, as I prepare to write this piece after the Champions League match day 4, I feel like we saw a fair amount of corners. In fact, probably a lot of corners in this Champions League. So I will head back into my team in competition, hit Champions League, and I want to really specify corners. Like that I've skipped the corners. Oh, there they are. All right, so I want to see in swinger corners somebody who's delivered more than 10 or equal to, equal to 10 or more, as well as outswingers. So somebody who has really diversified the amount of corners that they have delivered. Get results. Oh, I want it to be this season. Beautiful. I don't know who actually has done that. Chelsea. It's only Chelsea who has done that. Again, it gives you the breakdown of in-swingers and out-swingers. 11 to 14 is a very, very healthy split. If we are to bring those 10 a little bit down, because I feel like 10 could be a high number trying to hit, let's say an 8 and 8 on both, still very high. I feel like Brand could be sitting up here. I could be wrong though. Oh, it is AS Roma. Very interesting. They've scored actually from a few corners. That is not very surprising. Now, a question that might pop up is, can we look at the same criteria of teams onto players? And the answer is yes. So we're actually going to put the exact same filters that we put on those teams for the player. So if we're heading back to the player section, already we've got 10 in-swingers and 10 out-swingers. I want to see a player who's able to deliver both of these. Probably, yeah. I was expecting that to be a little bit too high. All right, we'll drop it back to 8. And now once again, I'm showing you this is because not every single filter you put in will actually have players that qualify for that. Get results. And that is very interesting. So we just saw Roma be able to hit very similar numbers to Chelsea. And there's a specific Roma player who's clearly putting them up high. And for any time you want to clear out your criteria, you just hit clear all and boom, you can start from scratch right away. Okay, let's try a very fun, I guess, stat here with a team that has had wins, more than 10 wins, who has also had, let's say, goals against, let's say, at least, let's say 10. Actually, I feel like 10 is our secret number today. For at least 30, and let's go with the WSL because why not? From 2020 up to now. Okay. Don't know if we're actually getting anything for this, but 3 filters is always a bit tricky, so why not try it out? Wow, there's actually a lot of teams that sit on here on different season. So obviously also I've got the sorting by wins, but we can always hit it by team and see what we have here. Okay, so Arsenal actually appear 3 times here. There's 3 different seasons that they've been able to hit the specific criteria. Aston Villa, this is actually a filter that I used very often when looking at Aston Villa's recent seasons, just to see if they've repeated a certain pattern multiple seasons. So clearly last season was a very, very successful one for Aston Villa, getting more than 10 wins, scoring more than 30 and conceding at least 10. That's not too bad for a team that finished 5th. You can actually see they're the only team who was able to hit that and finish 5th. Just right here on the ranking. Most of the time when teams are able to hit this criteria, they're finishing in the top 3 or 4. Only Manchester United did so in 2021 and 21-22. Very interesting. If you leave me on here, I can probably play around Stathead for hours upon hours. And the fact that it is free for us to use is actually quite crazy. And also I think it's super awesome that the women's game has gone to a point where you have this much data to work around for free. So a little bit of pros and some cons, and in my opinion, when using Stathead. I'm going to start with the good positive stuff. So for one, it is very easy to use, especially when you start. When I started working around or just like playing around with the criteria tools, it wasn't so hard to figure out because it's a very small area that you're working with. You've got the competition, the season, any of the filters that you want to work around. I like how it's not scattered all over the place. Everything is in a one spot. And like I mentioned, the fact that it operates all on one tab is super, super neat. And it makes things kind of in one place and not all over the place, which when you're working with numbers and kind of stats or anything that has this much numbers, it makes it so much easier and you're probably not leaving with a headache. Another thing that I really enjoy is the fact that there is an abundance of filters. Like I sit here sometimes, like I just don't have enough time going through these filters. A lot of these filters are diverse in terms of passes, in terms of goalie errors, which we didn't even get to go through, player shots, carries, red cards, yellow cards, in-swingers. Like they're very specific and there's a plethora of them. And if you were looking closely when I was going through the filters, you would have noticed that some of the filters are not applicable just yet. Now what this tells us is that there's more filters coming and they're consistently going to be adding different filters for us to use and gather just that a little bit more specific data that you're looking for. I also really enjoy the fact that they have multiple different leagues, multiple multiple different competitions in here. Most of the stats platforms that I've been able to use before discovering Stathead often did not have the Frauen Bundesliga, often did not have the Italian league, often did not have the Swedish league, which is a league that unfortunately, again, data platforms have not been prioritizing. But with here, you have so many teams and so many players that are intel'd that it really kind of validates and gives you that much more confidence knowing that where you're looking at is a very complete story. Now, obviously in the women's game is not going to be 100% complete story, but they've got the Dutch league. I mean, there's so many different players and input results that you can get where you know you're getting more of a complete picture than not. So obviously my likes is a very, very long list. Now, my dislikes aren't really huge dislikes, but sometimes the fetching time can get a little bit too long. Now, we're talking long as in like up to 8 or 7 seconds, especially when I've gone like 5 or 6 filters on. I think that's quite understandable purely because when you have that much data being specified, it takes a little bit to search through the numbers that they have in the back end to give those results. So I don't find it necessarily so annoying, but I know other users would want their fetched results really, really fast. Regardless, it doesn't bother me too much, but I can see why others wouldn't be too happy with it if it's taking 4 seconds instead of 2. So like I mentioned earlier, it's free to use up until February 1st. After that, it's going to be paid $9 a month. Now, I can understand why a lot of folks might find that slightly not expensive, but something that they cannot afford every single month. For students, that might be a little bit better because there are student discounts available. But for the general person who just watches women's football, I don't know if somebody is going to be happy or willing to pay $9 to hop onto this service to just go through some of the filters and some of the numbers that they want to look at. Which kind of brings me to the other question of who is Stathead for? I think Stathead is for everybody who is interested in numbers and stats when it comes to the women's game. For content creators, for journalists, for reporters, this is really, really important. There's a huge circle around me that I know use Stathead in preparation for games, in preparation for reporting about games. So this is a really nitty-gritty hand if you are in the industry. But there's also people who watch and don't report and don't create content that still enjoy going through these numbers. Is $9 too much for them? I think that's down to everybody's financial situation. Is the regular person who just hops on Sunday morning, Saturday morning to watch the games willing to pay $9 a month to go some of these stats that they can probably just access on the regular football reference? I doubt it, but I think that is up for everybody's preference, and I think $9 isn't too expensive where it's breaking the bank for somebody who just wants to explore it for a month, but at the same time, it's still $9, which is like a cup of coffee a month. I don't know. In a general sense, Stathead is a very, very cool platform to use. The amount of data and the amount of collection of numbers it has is superb that when you're hopping on, you can really diversify, like I mentioned, your filters. I love going on here and going through some of these numbers in preparation for a lot of my videos. You will likely see me spend some hours on Stathead kind of going through contextual numbers that might be of importance to the content that I produce to you guys. So if you want to try it out, you've got a few months to do that, obviously the entirety of January, and given that January window is approaching, you will be wanting to go through a lot of these names and a lot of the new clubs that some of your favorite players are headed to. I will leave a link down below for you guys to check out. Let me know your thoughts on this, if you've used it, if you've not used it, and what do you think about the game finally getting data and stats and numbers like this? Like, for a very good time, we did not have any of this, and it's fantastic that Sports Reference are able to roll out things like this for us to use and kind of explore. As always, let me know your thoughts down below, and to stay updated and to continue enjoying the beautiful game, make sure to subscribe to me here on YouTube and follow me on Twitter, and I will see you later.